With the impending release of Path of Exile 2, I thought it would be a good idea to play the original in preparation. Path of Exile was released in 2013 for the PC, with a console release on the Xbox One in 2017 and the PlayStation 4 in 2019. You can play it right now for free on those consoles along with Xbox Series X and S and the PlayStation 5. So how is it for new players? It's simultaneously accessible for new players and complicated beyond belief. It's one of those games whose systems are easy to understand, but even dedicated players with thousands of hours are still finding new ways to build characters, synergize skills, and combine different loadouts.
You and I, we're the only ones that made it to shore. Alive, anyway. Looks like you found something you can defend yourself with. Good. This place is crawling with criminals. There's smoke rising just east of here. Could be worth checking if there's...
If you were a massive fan of Diablo 2, then you would likely have been disappointed by the lack of releases afterwards. From 2000 onwards, you would probably have been checking a few other ARPGs, but would always return to the king of them, Diablo 2. But if you were a game developer, that disappointment and frustration with the lack of Diablo sequels would have been a great motivator to make your own game. That's what happened with Path of Exile. Forget about Diablo 3 for a second and imagine that Blizzard took Diablo 2 and continued to improve upon the formula. What if they kept the same dark tone, the build diversity, the items, and the quests for loot, the replayability? Then they tweaked things like skills, classes, equipment loadouts, and then improved upon them. Well, you would get Path of Exile. Playing this game feels like a better version of Diablo 2, which is an incredibly high bar to set. Feel is the key word here. I don't mean it just looks like a Diablo game. That's an easy thing to achieve. There are plenty of Diablo clones out there. But feeling like a Diablo game is much harder. Sure, you can make a game look like Diablo 2, just make it an isometric action RPG with a dark, gothic look. Give the main character levels and skills, a red health orb on the left-hand side of the screen and a blue orb on the right, and then send them out to fight undead monsters and demons. Boom, you have a Diablo clone. There are lots of those, they can be a dime a dozen. But there's a reason that Diablo 2 is considered the best of the best. It just plays better. Your skills are fast, you can spam them out without any cooldowns. You can build your class in so many different ways, usually depending on your personal play style and the equipment you happen to pick up along the way. The enemies are unique and fun to fight, they come in waves that you mow down, but you don't die easily, so it becomes this mix of mindless combat and challenging situations where you can almost always be on the edge of death, but you're never grinding your progress to a halt. A Diablo game can be hard to describe in that it's both mindless and relaxing, but challenging and rewarding all at the same time. It's satisfying as hell. Path of Exile captures that balance perfectly. But it isn't just a Diablo 2 clone, it does a lot of things differently. I won't dive too deeply into the actual gameplay here, but if you are interested in Path of Exile, you likely already know how it plays. Just look at the footage playing on the screen right now and you've got a sense of it. Let's start the real review by talking about the characters and the skills, since this is one of the most important things that separates Path of Exile from the Diablo series or any other clones. You have a few characters to choose from as a new player, with additional characters open on subsequent playthroughs as you unlock them. For clarity, I'm only going to be talking about the starting characters, since this is a review intended for new players. The starting characters for new players are based around three main attributes: strength, dexterity, and intelligence. You basically pick your character as a template for what kind of playstyle you're looking for. Do you want to be a close-range fighter, a long-range archer, or a mage? These three types are the three pure attribute builds. The Marauder is the fighter, the Ranger is the archer, and the Witch is the mage. Then you do have hybrid characters that use two or more of these attributes, like the Duelist and the Templar. But this review is going to stick with the pure build since it makes it so much easier for new players to understand the game's mechanics. My advice is stick with either the Marauder, the Ranger, or the Witch for your first playthrough. Once you beat the main storyline with one of those characters, Go crazy on builds and other classes, since you will be able to understand the skills, equipment, and other requirements for those builds you're going to look up online. So you pick either the strength build, dexterity, or intelligence, and then you start. I chose the witch for my first playthrough. When you get a character, you'll immediately notice that the skill tree is absolutely massive. I mean, look how many you have to choose from. It's like the sky at night and every star is a skill to pick from. But don't worry, it's not as complicated as all that seems. Most of these skills are just bonuses for your character's attributes, not abilities to use. A lot of them are like plus 10 to intelligence, bonus mana, bonus health, that sort of thing. Once you realize that the skill tree isn't a million different abilities, it does make it a lot easier to navigate, especially when you find a playstyle you like. But when in doubt, pick a skill on a level up that boosts your character's main attribute, like intelligence for example. You can never go wrong with just boosting your main attribute, especially when you're just starting to learn how the game works. Now you may be trying to compare this system with Diablo 2, where you level up and you get some attribute points to put in intelligence or strength or whatever, and a skill point to put in, say, Raise Skeleton or Fireball or some other ability. Path of Exile doesn't work that way. Each level, or sometimes when you complete quests, you do get a skill point. This is the bonus for your character, but it's not an ability. Abilities come from gems that you socket into your item. Unlike Diablo 2, where socketed items give percentage bonuses or other enhancements, these gems that you socket here provide spells and abilities for your character, which means character builds in Path of Exile can be way more diverse than, say, Diablo 2. In Diablo 2, a necromancer raises skeletons and a sorceress casts fireballs. In Path of Exile, anyone can do that, provided they have the stats to support that ability. Sure, the witch has more intelligence in their tree, but if you boost them enough, a marauder can raise a skeleton if they want to. That means that you can build your character any way you want to match the playstyle you prefer, provided you found the gem that goes with it. It also means that you're way more beholden to the god of RNG than Diablo. You could theoretically never find that raised skeleton gem, meaning your witch wouldn't have access to that spell. Unlike Diablo 2, where a necromancer always has it. Gems get slotted into equipment, matching the color of the slot with the gem. This makes the types of items you use incredibly important. Swords usually have red or green slots, meaning they're either strength or dexterity based gems. Wands and staffs usually have blue, meaning they use intelligence gems. If you look closely, you can see that some of these items have a line connecting their gem slots. This means that you can use a support gem to enhance your spells. I'll give you an example. Early in my playstyle, I found the Fireball gem, which is blue, and the Raise Dead gem, which is also blue. I had both of those spells available to use. As I did so, they go up in levels, making the spells more powerful. I could raise more zombies, and my fireballs did more damage. Then I picked up the Enhance Minion Damage gem. This was a blue support gem that, if I linked it to my Raise Dead gem, made it better. The only problem was I needed an item with a link. So I was always on the lookout for a better item with both blue sockets and a link between those sockets. As you play, you're going to find a ton of gems, allowing you to build your character any way you want. I preferred having minions, so all of my gems were dedicated to that ability. I could raise an army, and all of my support gems were used to make that army better. As my character gained more levels from XP, so did my gems. Now, a big part of Path of Exile is the items you use. There's a lot of loot to be gained here, almost too much at times. You're going to be ignoring a lot of the things on the ground, but when you sell those items, you do get materials for upgrading additional items. You get the ability to make a normal item into a magical item or a rare. You can re-roll attributes, forge new links between sockets, increase the amount of sockets in those items, etc. Your stash will be full of these things, and it's all part of building your ultimate character. But I don't want to go too deep into the weeds about building characters for Path of Exile. Just be aware that, as a new player, you're going to be stumbling blind through your first playthrough. That's expected and not the end of the world. Find a playstyle you like, try to build it the best you can, and just have fun. It's when you play the game again, or for the 100th time, that the build diversity will really make a difference.
A wayfish, waterlogged witch, washed up in Wraeclast. That's the first line of the poem I'm writing about you, Exile. Easy go. You could scorch your blood with a look like that.
The story of Path of Exile is not fantastic. It has a lot of interesting lore bits, but it's not a gripping narrative. It's one of those stories that's just kind of there to get you out the door and playing. There aren't any cutscenes, so don't expect Diablo 2's epic, the Wanderer moments. It's mostly told in that classic scrolling text with voiceover, just without the memorable Deckard Cain saying, "Stay a while and listen." The story is, you're in exile. Depending on what character you chose, your crime will be different. It doesn't really matter, it's just a little bit of lore flavor. Whatever your crime is, you are sent to Wraeclast for it. That's where the title Path of Exile comes from. It's you, the exile, finding your way through this world. Wraeclast is gothic horror at its finest. There are undead, demons, and devils everywhere, and you're one of just a few people there trying to survive at first. This is a penal colony for criminals, sort of like an evil version of Australia. Basically, the land is corrupted because people there are doing experiments, and you need to stop them simply because, you don't want to die. Once you do stop them, you find that it's part of this much bigger problem, so you need to stop more people in the only way you know how, which is killing everyone. There's a lot of interesting story here if you're willing to speak to everyone and pick up all the collectible notes and records in the world. But I have a feeling that most people who play Path of Exile just skip a lot of it. It's more like lore that's there if you want it, otherwise just click out of it and keep going. It's a shame that it just wasn't as memorable as, say, Diablo 2, although this is debatable and you're going to find plenty of people who enjoyed the story quite a bit, but I found it lacked a lot of that cohesion or a main focal point. There wasn't a lot of through point or a main baddie like the Wanderer who tied everything together. Often it felt like just each new act just threw new names and locations and characters at you, with only a few recurring along the way. Alright, let's get into the pros and cons of Path of Exile. For the pros, the game looks incredible. The environments are detailed, the character models are really good. It runs very well on console, with only a few frame drops. Despite having a ton of stuff on screen, it's usually based on network issues. There is a lot of content here. You can easily get 40 or 50 hours playtime on your very first playthrough, with a lot of its replayability coming from new characters, builds, and of course the endless search for more loot. The microtransactions aren't egregious. Sure, there are a ton of stuff you can buy, but it's mostly cosmetics and a few stash upgrades. These microtransactions aren't just thrown in your face, and as a new player, you probably won't even need to look at it at all in your first playthrough of the main story. The biggest pro? Path of Exile is free. It's crazy that there's so much content here with this level of polish for a free-to-play game. But there are cons. The story isn't told in the best way. It could have used something else besides just dialogue and voiceover, maybe a cutscene or two. There's a bunch of interesting lore, but you have to go search for it in towns and out in the world, meaning you can miss some important information. The controls on console aren't the greatest, particularly for managing your inventory. It's clear that this game was meant to be played on PC. I found myself pressing the wrong buttons a lot, and there wasn't an easy way to say swap gear or gems to new items, meaning the process can take time. Character building can be daunting, and the tutorial on how to do it is nearly non-existent. It took me an embarrassing amount of time to learn how links work and gemstones work. The difficulty can spike suddenly, especially if your build isn't equipped for a certain element type or enemy. If you aren't building your character correctly, expect to be stopped at bosses until you do figure it out. And that's it for another review. Path of Exile is definitely worth your time checking out, and there's a reason that it has lasted for over a decade as one of the top free-to-play games available. I'm very much looking forward to Path of Exile 2 when it releases. I'm the Casual Console Gamer, and I'll see you all in the next review.